Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Male Perspectives. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today with me, I have the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Stephen Howard. He is the author of the book, Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. Stephen, welcome, and thank you for hanging out with me today.
Hey, I appreciate it. Sounds like we're going to have some fun.
Yes, indeed. And where am I speaking to you from? What city are you in?
Well, right now I'm in Palm Springs, California, where it's about 116 degrees. So I'm inside talking to you.
Okay, awesome. And some air conditioning. Palm Springs, I love that town. Visit it every now and then. I love that city. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it's good fun.
So one of your soapbox issues, I want to start off with one of your topics that you like to talk about, and that is men's health.
Yes.
And you mentioned that it's important that men already have other stressors going on in their lives, but health is something that they really need to focus on. What are some of the things that men really need to understand about their behaviors and their actions that influence down the line health issues?
That's excellent. I appreciate that, because that's exactly, I think, the key issue in today's world is that, and what I'm talking about mostly is dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And many people think that's an old-timers disease. It's something, I talk to a lot of senior executives, and they say, oh, I'll worry about that when I retire. Well, research is now showing us that what we do to our bodies in our 30s and 40s directly impacts our risk for dementia and Alzheimer's in our 60s and 70s. So I think that's one of the key messages that men need to understand right now. And in addition to that, some research that came out late last year is that men who pack on the most abdominal fat in their 40s have the highest risk for dementia in their 60s and 70s. So it's our lifestyle that's hurting us long term.
So got to get rid of the gut fat.
You get rid of the gut fat and reduce stress as much as you can in your life. And, that's hard in today's world, quite frankly.
Yes, it seems more complicated to reduce stress in today's world. And you would think that it would be easier, but, it's just really chaotic. Now, you also segue this into the stressors that men have in the workplace. Can you touch on that for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's these stupid things, they beep and buzz at us constantly. And quite frankly, and I encourage people to do this. And next time your phone beeps at you, notice your reaction, because you twitch, you look at it. That's the same physiological reaction. It's the same cortisol and adrenaline that the brain's secreting into your blood as if a snake showed up.
Oh, okay.
So every time your phone buzzes at you, it's like a snake's looking at you. And this constant resupply of cortisol and adrenaline is keeping us at a high stress level, and we're not allowing our system to calm down and get into more of a normal pattern. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that's going to hurt us long term.
I know you mentioned the cell phones, and I noticed, as you become an adult and you have adult responsibilities, male or female, you're consumed with being able to keep a roof over your head and keep food on the table. That's one of your primary concerns. But I've noticed that I tend to work more with this thing. I'm always working at 7 days. I'm answering emails. I'm, doing calls 7 days a week. How do you suggest that men disconnect and turn off? Because it seems that that's part of the problem that they need to learn how to do, is just get away from this.
It is. I fly a lot. One of the things I enjoy about flying, quite honestly, if travel is no longer fun, but one of the nice things about being on an airplane today is you can't use your phone. Unless you're going to pay for Wi-Fi. So you get 2 or 3 hours with no interruptions. Well, I now take that in my personal life. So when I'm working on a book, for instance, I literally put my phone on airplane mode, so that when I go make a cup of coffee, let's say I've been working for an hour, stop, go make another cup of coffee, I'm not tempted to go look at those emails, look at those text messages, and I'll usually write in 2 to 3 hour spurts. And then I'll go look at all my email at one time. And that does 2 things for me. One, it reduces that reaction to constantly be in touch with everything. And secondly, the brain really cannot multitask. And so if I were to look at my text messages while the kettle's boiling, while I'm making my cup of coffee, my brain is shifted now to those messages. And it takes minutes for the brain to shift back to whatever chapter I'm working on in a book. Well, that's what we all need to do. We need to stay focused on one topic at a time, stop bouncing back and forth between topics, and let the brain do its job and help us become more creative, more innovative, make better decisions, quite frankly, in that kind of a mode, rather than bouncing back and forth between trying to multitask.
Okay, amazing. Now you just mentioned better decisions, and that is part of your book. So I want to talk about your book because the title is very creative, very unique, kind of like, so we have better decisions, better thinking, better outcomes. What is that about? How does that all tie in? It just sounds so amazing.
Well, thank you very much. And it took me a while before I landed on that title. And when I first started writing, it was actually better thinking, better decisions, better outcomes. And people think that makes more logical sense. If we think better, we'll make better decisions. If we make better decisions, we'll have better outcome. But as I did the research and talking about the stress that you and I have just been talking about here, and one thing I'm coaching leaders in today, and men and women as well, is that our emergency personnel are called first responders for a reason. And I was trained as a rescue scuba diver many years ago. And one of the first things you're trained in as a diver, a rescue diver, is assess the situation. You see a diver in distress, you just don't jump in the water because you might put yourself in danger, you might put other people in danger, you might put the boat in danger. So assess first, and then respond to the situation. That's why they're called first responders. Well, most people in today's world are first reactors. Something happens, something blows up at work, somebody makes a bad decision, and right away we're reacting to that, and we're reacting emotionally to that. And so my message to particularly leaders is learn to be a first responder, not a first reactor. Does that make sense?
A first responder, not a first
Be a
reactor.
first responder, yeah. Be a first responder. So in other words, you're not reacting to situations. So basically the first decision to make, going back to your question, is make the decision to get your emotions under control. Do not get emotionally hijacked. Make that decision to be, I'm going to respond to the situation, not to react. And then I'll get better thinking, and then I'll get better outcomes. So that's the reason the book title's that way.
Now that sounds easier said than done, cliche-ish, right? Like, so
Yes.
How do you start this process of like, okay, let me step back, let me think for a minute, let me process, because when you're in that moment, it's all kind of like a fight or flight sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I think people need to be taught, like, are there some key elements or key tips on how to like step back and like, hold on, let me.
Step back is beautiful language, and you can do it mentally. And the best technique is one used by the U.S. Navy SEALs. And I don't believe anybody has a more stressful job than the Navy SEALs. So what they do is called box breathing. They will inhale for 5 seconds, hold it for 5 seconds, exhale for 5, hold that exhale for 5 seconds, and then inhale. And they'll repeat this for 3 or 4, even 5 minutes as they're preparing to go into a stressful situation. So the first thing, as you just said, step back. First thing is purposeful breathing. Get yourself under control. The second thing is remember what many of our mothers used to tell us. I remember as a child being told, when you get angry, you don't hit somebody, you count to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was just an old wives' tale. But it turns out there's scientific backing for that, in that when you get emotionally hijacked, the back part of your brain, the amygdala, is the one taking over. That's running the emotions. That's releasing the cortisol and the adrenaline. When you make a conscious decision to pause, as you said, step back, breathe, it takes roughly 8 seconds for the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, the rational center of your brain, to take over. So counting to 10 is roughly 8 seconds. So that's what you need to do. And that's how you stop getting emotionally hijacked at work and making decisions that you end up having to course correct a couple weeks later because it was the wrong decision.
Okay, awesome. Now, talking about the stepping back and the 10 seconds, I can see this parlaying to male relationships they have outside of work, because sometimes, you're sitting there with your loved one, your significant other, things are not going too well.
And so we turn on Sports Center while she continues to talk. Sorry, darling, the game's on. And how well is that working?
I know, right? So now we need to learn how to step back, count to 10. Okay, babe, I hear what you're saying, and
and most important, and then listen, for crying out loud. And that's what a lot of leaders don't do. They don't listen in the workplace. That's what a lot of men don't do in their personal relationships. They don't listen. They Stephen Covey had a great phrase in one of his early books. He said, one of our problems as communicators is that we listen with the intent to respond, not with the intent to understand. Well, pausing, stepping back, taking a purposeful breath puts us in a mindset so that we are trying to understand what the person is saying to us, whether it's work related or personal related,
Hmm.
and rather than trying to respond to it. And that's
Oh,
the key to it, quite frankly.
awesome. So we as women and other people that are surrounding men that love you guys and want the best for you, uh, how do we support you in this journey of not only making better decisions, but helping you segue into a lifestyle that reduces the chances of, well, actually, you said that you can probably eliminate the possibility of dementia or Alzheimer's, right?
You can greatly reduce it unless you do have there is some of it is genetics. So there's,
Okay.
unless you do have some DNA markers that you have inherited, which is unfortunate, but most of it can be reduced or at least postponed, into your 80s or 90s. I mean,
Okay.
longer we live, I'm not sure we can eliminate dementia, but we
Okay.
can certainly reduce it and certainly postpone it.
Okay, so the support team that is surrounding and embracing you fellas, what can we do on our end to help you and assist you in this journey?
Notice when we're getting stressed and help, and then you step back, or sometimes you have a signal between two people, between couples, and sort of say, okay, right. If you tell somebody, hey honey, you're getting stressed out, calm down, first reaction will be, no, I'm not, I'm fine, I'm in control. All right, so sometimes just a little signal, sometimes understanding that by continuing the discussion or the argument or whatever is going to cause more stress. Sometimes you need to have a timeout, and
Hmm.
and and that's hard. I mean, it's hard on both parties, quite frankly. But as you say, the support group is there to support us. And guys need to do the same thing with our women in our lives or partners in our lives, whatever it happens to be. We need to be more sensitive to that. Same thing with teenagers. We have to understand that teenagers are going to be highly emotional. Their brains are not fully developed, particularly the prefrontal cortex part of the brain. And therefore, they're going to be highly emotional. They're going to be irrational. They're not going to be making adult decisions at age 16 and 17. Well, rather than jump down their throats about that, stop and understand it, and then help them um, learn how to control their emotions. We'll teach them how to purposeful breathe, teach them how to give themselves a 5-second timeout or a 10-second timeout. We all need to help each other. It'd be a much nicer, kinder world if we did.
Oh yes, oh yes. Now you mentioned the teenagers just now, and one of the things that's really concerning to me, especially because we talked about these things
Right.
earlier and technology. I really think that social media, the phones, the technology really kind of plays out and puts extra pressure on our teenagers, especially our young boys. So, is there something as parents or that we need to be doing to kind of adjusting this for them?
I think two things. I think one, parents and teachers need to be teaching children, and even those in their 20s right now, multitasking. As I mentioned earlier, we don't multitask. The brain just bounces back between thoughts.
Mhm.
Um, Multitasking is teaching our brain not to focus. The inability to focus is a leading indicator of dementia. So unfortunately, what's happening in society is that our 20-year-olds and our teenagers now, who are basically teaching the brain not to ever focus, are going to have increased risk of dementia in their 60s and 70s and even 50s, quite frankly. So
Mhm.
I think that's number one, is to get that message out to them. The second thing is, I think, is to just help them learn to shut the devices off.
Okay.
Teach them that you can go an hour without your phone. You can go 2 hours without your phone. You can go an hour without text messaging everybody, and be present. Be present with the people that you're with. One of the most disgusting things I think I've ever seen in my life was 2.5 years ago. I went out for Christmas Eve dinner, and I sat across from a family of 5. Two teenagers, one looked like a young adult, 20, 21, and the parents. All 5 of them were on their phones at Christmas Eve dinner. And I
Wow.
said, what are you doing to yourselves? Why even go out, quite
Yeah,
honestly?
we could have stayed at the house for that.
Yeah. So
That's just really crazy. It's really crazy. So I really, you said it a couple of times, and you really were taught. I'm 50, but you were taught in growing up in my culture, like the leadership, the great successful person. Multitasking was it. Multitasking was the way to go. So it's kind of deprogramming yourself to like one task at a time. Do this, complete this, and then move on to the next task.
Absolutely.
That's a new concept, but I guess it's really like that's just, we have to accept that now. That's just the way to get.
Well, it is, and quite frankly, the MRI technology has only been around 15 to 20 years now that scientists have actually been able to look at the brain, look deeply at the brain, and you know, and they do all kinds of research now on people who are doing meditation and seeing what the impact of meditation is on the brain, and see what the impact of multitasking is on the brain, and see what the impact of emotional hijacking on the brain. So yeah, so a lot of things that we were taught in, you know, a long time ago is obviously now being proven, well, that's wrong. But, you know, I would also say that, you know, if you look at leadership, in the late 60s or early 70s, particularly in corporate America, it was control and command. It was my way or the highway. I'm the boss. You're the subordinate. Well, that doesn't work today either. So, you know, the things do change, and we have much more educated workforce today. And you cannot, and other than, you know, control and command works in the military and military type organizations like fire department, police department, things of that nature. There is a time for control and command. I mean, a surgeon in the operating theater needs to be in command, and when he or she says something, the nurses have to respond exactly. There's no questioning that. But in the general workplace today, no, everyone questions. Everyone needs to understand why behind a decision is being made. So things have changed. Society has changed in the last 40 years or so.
Okay, good tips, good pointers, good pointer. Yeah, you know, just like I said, it's just interesting to hear the dialogue, because, you know, I feel like sometimes even today, and I read the research, I know the research, I know better, but I still feel like, okay, I got to, you know, put the dinner on, and I got to go up here and I got to do this, but you're being counterproductive, you know.
You're being counterproductive. You're damaging your interpersonal relationships. I mean, and I talk to more and more people. I've got a very good friend of mine, and she's a single mom, and she says that she and her son, they have dinner every night together for half an hour, and they literally leave their phones in their respective bedrooms. And I thought, wow, that's a great policy. The two of you have half an hour to talk about her day, his day. He's I think he's 14 or 15. You know, he's obviously in school, so you know they get some quality time every night together without being interrupted by the phone. And I think that more and more people should be thinking along those lines.
Amazing. And like you said, you went to the restaurant and you noticed the whole family was there. Yeah. But I've seen a couple of restaurants where they actually have these little basket containers at the table, where that's what you're supposed to do. Everybody drops their cell phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the basket for the whole time, and nobody's using them or whatever. But people are starting to transition and knowing that this is sort of becoming our downfall as a society. You know, people don't even know how to communicate just in public, talk to each other, because we've become so dependent on this internet access and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, I think that's a great idea.
So I want to go back to the book, Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. Is it out now?
Yes, it came out October of last year. It's on Amazon in both paperback and in Kindle. It's doing quite well. I'm pleased with it. So yeah, people can get it through Amazon.
So can we catch you around town speaking or anything, or do you, because you mentioned the leadership thing?
I do a lot of corporate training programs, leadership training programs for corporations. I do some speaking. I'd like to do more, quite honestly, but you know, the schedule and getting known in the speaking industry is a bit difficult at times. But I gave a couple speeches earlier this year in the education industry. Just gave one last week here in the Coachella Valley where I live to some business owners, and we talked about some of the things you and I are talking about, how you can build your business by making better decisions. And talked about why we make bad decisions in the business place. So yeah, you can catch me around there. But I also have a blog. It's on my website. You can go there and look at my blog, and I blog 2 or 3 times a week, often about these topics as well. So
okay. So you personally, Stephen, how do you keep the pounds off the gut, and how do you reduce the chances of Alzheimer's and dementia? What are you doing for yourself personally?
I got into this because my father suffered from some early stage Alzheimer and dementia in his last years. I had actually returned from living overseas to look after my dad in his last few years. So then I started studying this for myself. And so I did 2 things. I got into a program. I lost 30 pounds in about 6 weeks. And I've been able to keep that off. And so I'm at the weight I want to be at. I can always lose a couple more pounds, obviously. But the other thing I do, I've got the luxury here of living in Palm Springs where the weather's warm year round. So I try and swim every day, or 5 out of 7 days when I'm not traveling. When I'm traveling, I try and increase my walking. So I through airports, obviously I walk a lot, but if I walk after a full day of training, I'll walk a half mile or a mile near my hotel or something like that. And that's the beauty of it, is once you get to the right weight, it only takes about 20 minutes a day of aerobic type exercise. You don't have to run a mini marathon. You don't have to run a marathon. Just 20 minutes a day outside, if possible, if the weather's permitting. That fresh air, seeing greenery, that's what the brain loves, and that will help you keep the weight off. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Now, I've been very health conscious for quite some time. I've been a vegetarian myself for 19 years. And a lot of my male friends, my males in my life that I love, I'm always kind of nagging, well, you need to eat better, you need to do this, but they don't want to hear it from me for some reason. So I'm glad I will play this for them when it comes out, and hopefully they'll hear it, because for some reason or another, men hear it better from men than from me. But and that's something that we probably need to address. Like you have people around you, like we talked about earlier, your support system, and they want the best for you, but sometimes you guys are knuckleheads and you don't want
well here just play this segment for them, Lana. 2 things: sugar, soft drinks, diet sodas are all connected with brain aging and smaller overall brain volume. And additionally, people with too much belly fat actually have smaller brains. And this is what part of what I found very interesting in my research was, because when I grew up, I was taught our brain stopped growing approximately age 20 to 25. Science can now prove we continue to grow new brain cells into our 70s, probably be even in our 80s, but there's just not a lot of 80-year-olds around to test on it yet. So guys, that additional belly fat you have, it's stopping your brain from continuing to grow in your 50s and 60s, and you will actually have a smaller brain than somebody like me, who I've taken all sodas out of my diet. I used to drink, years ago, I used to drink like 5 Cokes a day, and then I went to 5 Coke Zeros a day, and that apparently Coke Zero is even worse for us than Coke. I got rid of all that. I drink water. I have my occasional adult beverage every now and then. Yeah, if you get rid of that, reduce your sugar. My coffee used to be 1 spoonful of coffee, 1 spoonful of sugar. And now it's 1 spoonful of coffee and just a little bit of sugar. And sometimes I don't even put the sugar in it at all. So the other thing to understand, guys, is what's good for our heart is good for our brain. Our brain is the biggest user of blood and the biggest user of oxygen in our bodies. So everything we've been taught about, weight training, reducing weight, walking, exercising, for our health, is also good for our brain. And then at the same time, all that stuff helps reduce our blood pressure, so that people won't nag at us about our excess weight, which puts stress on us. See, you admitted, Madam Support Group. Nagging at us, it don't work.
I'm glad you mentioned the sugar, because just the other day, 2 days ago, one of my friends had one of those tall energy drinks, right? So I'm like, I turned the can over. I'm like, look at how much sugar this has. And I don't want to hear it, Lana. I don't want to hear it. Go away. I'm gonna
Well, a bigger belly means a smaller brain. So guys, it's your choice. What do you want to, and from now on, every woman who sees this video is going to look at you and say, you got a smaller brain.
There you go. And that's a piece of information that you pointed out, because a lot of times we believe that once you reach a certain age, it stops, but to know that the body will regenerate brain cells and create some new ones, and you can continue to grow. That's wonderful, wonderful information there. So stop the sugar, fellas.
Stop the sugar. And stop sitting. The other last tip is if you sit all day in meetings, sit at your desk, the last thing you want to do is go home and sit in front of the TV on a couch. You get that 20 minutes, go walk somewhere, get some movement, walk between meetings. Speaking of which, the last tip I'll give you, this is for everybody, guys and gals. I now coach leaders. All meetings should be 45 minutes or 75 minutes. Scheduled for an hour, but run your agenda, finish the meeting within 45 minutes or 75 minutes, because all meetings start top of the hour, bottom of the hour. So here's why. Everyone runs back-to-back meetings. Their calendars are full. Boom, boom, boom. Right, and everyone's running from one meeting to the brain doesn't have time to stop thinking about the current meeting on the way to the next meeting. And so you spend in the next meeting, your first 5-7 minutes, the brain's still thinking about the last meeting. And so you're wasting time. So if you give yourself 15 minutes between meetings, 5 minutes for the brain to kind of consolidate all the information about what you've just discussed, write your notes, send your quick confirmation emails, whatever you need to do, 5 minutes to pause. Breathe, rest. If possible, go outside, get a breath of fresh air. If not, look outside the window, look at some greenery, look at the trees blowing in the wind, whatever it is. And then 5 minutes to prepare for the next meeting. And then go into the next meeting prepared and start, and now you're more productive.
Awesome.
15 minutes between meetings and I've had executives now come back to me and say that's one of the best things they've done in the last 4 or 5 months is change the way they run their meetings.
Awesome. And I guess maybe if you can, why overload yourself? Why? Well, I mean, I guess leadership you have to have back to back, but I'm thinking maybe we could cut down the amount of meetings we're having per day.
You could, but again, I work mostly with these big multinational companies, and people are not in control of their own schedule, and other people book them. They all have access to people's calendar. And they go, oh, Lana's free at 10:40.
Wait a minute, what?
I'm gonna book Lana into a meeting, and she comes out of a meeting and goes, oh, I've got this other meeting I got to go to, and somebody else.
So, I'm gonna watch cat videos on YouTube. What are you talking about?
So that's why I don't think people purposely book themselves into meetings, but other people book them into back-to-back meetings constantly, particularly in these big organizations.
All righty, Stephen. I have this part where I do my random question.
Uh-oh.
Yes,
okay.
Everybody always says, uh-oh. We're going to do a random question, and then we're going to wrap up here. Could you give up access to the internet for a month?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes, I could. only after giving up access to email for a month. I'd be totally happy.
Awesome. All right, Stephen. Before we get out of here, please give everybody the information on how to connect with you, how to get your book, and all of that stuff.
Great, appreciate it. So the book is on Amazon. It's called Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. It's one of the 20 books I've written, paperback and Kindle. Personally, I'm on Twitter at Stephen B. Howard. So Stephen Stephen with the V. So Stephen B. Howard.
V Victor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And email address is Stephen@CalianteLeadership.com. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's Caliante Leadership is people know Caliante means hot, but another definition of Caliante is passionate. And so a conversation caliente in Spanish means a passionate conversation. Okay. So I am passionate about leadership, plus where I live, the land's owned by the Agua Caliente Band of Indians. So it's my tribute to our Native American landowners. Okay. So it's Stephen@CalianteLeadership.com. The website is CalianteLeadership.com as well, and hope to connect with your listeners and your viewers.
I have had a wonderful time talking with you today, Stephen. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Much success to you, and keep that gut fat down. And if I see you out in public, hopefully I won't have to nag you about anything.
Well, you'd be one of a long list of women who have, dear, but yeah, hopefully not. I'll keep the gut down. I promise you. Great show. I enjoyed talking with you, and best of luck and success with this program. I think it's really wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you. You have a wonderful one.
Thank you. Cheers.